Welcome to They Live by Film, a platform dedicated to bringing you film discussion and interviews from around the world. I am Adam Lundy, and I am joined as always by my co-hosts Chris Haskell and Zach Bryant. Hello,
Hello.
how are we?
Good, man.
Not too bad, not too bad. I'm not as tired as usual since I've already been up for a while.
And what have you been up doing, Zach? Can you spoil it at a high level?
Sure, why not? Since his will be out today. I wish I could edit that quickly, but
Seriously.
yeah. So as many people who listen pretty regularly know, we've had Crypt Picks as a YouTuber on. So I did a podcast video with him talking about David Gordon Green's Halloween. By the time you listen to this, it would have probably been out for what, 3 weeks. So I don't feel like I'm spoiling anything since we're at a little bit. We have a little bit more backlog to get through before that. So yeah, so turn into that in a few weeks, and you'll get to hear me be completely correct on how good that trilogy is.
It's awesome.
And we had an
No
episode. I
comment.
know we did like a short episode. I could
We
not
did.
tell you which one it is now because it wasn't. It was like an any other business thing.
Yeah, we did it in the middle of an episode. It was the most deranged thing ever because we ended up talking about those more than we talked about the actual featured films. It was
Was it
utterly
cocktail or
deranged.
something? Was it
I have
cocktail
no
maybe?
idea.
It was
I
one of
don't
those.
remember. It'll be in the title somewhere of a like it would have been back before we were doing special themed episodes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So it was a long time. It would have been when Ends like just came out. It would have been when it was like really fresh, it had just been released.
Yeah.
Um
So if you
so
want a comparison of what I thought then and how it's changed and evolved since then, I guess go listen to that one. Though I can't guarantee that episode's any good. I can't remember which one it is.
God, I have to revisit the third one. Is the third one ends? It is,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I'd have to revisit that at some point because man, did I hate that movie the first time I saw it. But maybe it'll change with time.
It's because you're correct, Chris. That's why. Um yeah.
But
Anyone been watching or collecting anything? It's been like less than a week since we spoke last, so I don't know if there has been anything during the week since we last recorded, but
No, I want to say, Adam, remember how when we started this 3 years ago,
hmm
um, you were, and Zach, to some extent, you were as well, a staunch defender of Marvel,
yeah.
and 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 I said that although I'm a little bit down on them at that time, I still have a long history of going to midnight screenings and being in theaters, and I was fascinated by the MCU, right? And we've talked at length about what they're doing for directors of color and what they're doing for diversity in Hollywood. A lot of good stuff they're doing, right?
hmm
Um, I just think they've given up. I saw the Marvels on the plane. Um, it's hardly a movie. Like it feels like it's made in the same spirit as those TV shows they're putting out on Netflix or Disney Plus or whatever.
Yeah, the Marvels, the editing, especially in the first act, it's a mess. The first act is another mess. It feels like it got butchered in the editing room,
Yeah,
and it's like way shorter than a lot of their more recent films. So I think they kind of got scared of long run times, and they ended up butchering that film. Not like I'm not saying it would have been a masterpiece or anything, but I do feel it probably got a bit butchered in the editing room to try and sort of make it a bit more snappy, but it just ends up being just very messy and like the first act is almost incoherent.
yeah.
which has a bit of irony, right? Like one of the biggest like criticisms the DCEU got was like butchering their films in the editing room.
Yeah.
And now we're looking at Marvel, who's getting scared because they're not doing as well in the box office, doing the exact same thing and getting criticized for it. So
Mm.
it's like you should have known, like, trying to fix it in the edit is never like necessarily the solution a lot of times.
Yeah, I think Shang-Chi, I think, was the last one that I remember leaving and being like, yeah, that was a good one. Like that was a good
Yeah.
comic movie.
Like when we started this, as you said, like I was a big Marvel guy. I didn't think I would ever get Marvel fatigue because I am a child at heart. So I never really thought I would get Marvel fatigue because, I just think superheroes are dope. It's just call it a character flaw or whatever, but I think superheroes are cool as shit. So I never really thought I'd get Marvel fatigue. I absolutely have Marvel fatigue. I don't remember when the last time I saw one in a theater. Actually, I did see the Marvels in the theater, but that was I hadn't seen the last few, like Ant-Man and Guardians of the Galaxy 3. I didn't go see
Yeah.
those in the theater. I feel like since Endgame, they should have just stopped at Endgame. They captured lightning in a bottle for those first 10 years. I think they really did capture lightning in a bottle. And Infinity War and Endgame were such a great way of tying up the
Yeah.
franchise. It was such a great cathartic ending. I
Yeah.
do like, the experience of watching Endgame in the theater is just unlike anything I've ever had before. Opening night at midnight screening, watching crowds react as if it was like a sports game. It was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I just don't think they'll ever get to that point again, no matter what convoluted shit they do with multiverses and fan service, bringing back Fox characters like Wolverine, and so they'll never hit that height again.
Yeah.
If anything, they just need to stop trying to capture that and just go back to their roots of just making a couple of films about interesting characters and just make them, their own thing. They don't have to have these huge events
Yeah.
because they'll never, it will never be as good as Infinity War and Endgame. It doesn't matter what they do.
The the only thing this is going to sound opposite of what you said. I 189% agree with you. Whatever. I you said it exactly how I feel. The only thing is interesting about what they did with Marvels that I want to see what they explore. Is it okay if we talk about spoilers in the end credit?
I
Doesn't
don't think
matter.
anyone gives a shit about. I don't know. Don't think any of our listeners are going to give a shit about the Marvel's end credit sequence.
They had crossover into X-Men, and then technically the this one what's it called? Deadpool and Wolverine is going to be part of Phase 5, right?
Hmm.
So or part of the end of Phase 4 or whatever. So that could be interesting because the X-Men I've always been like I didn't read comics growing up except for X-Men, so I have a personal kind of attachment there, I guess. Um, I'd be curious what they do with that. Maybe not in the Marvels. Hopefully they don't make it like the Marvels, but just the fact that they're bringing those characters in. And then I think they're even bringing in Thunderbolts.
Yeah, the Thunderbolts movie has been in production for a little while. Um,
I have no idea how they're going to make that a part of the MCU, but that'd be awesome.
well, a lot
It
of the
just feels
characters
like a
that are in
lack.
it. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just saying it's just a lack of direction. Like I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of like one of these things where it's like, where are they going to go? Like, there's plenty
Well,
of ways I guess they could go, but they don't feel committed to anything.
they've been building up this multiverse thing for a while now. This idea of the multiverse breaking. The Loki series really sort of goes into that. This is kind of part of the problem now is that they've made this like before with TV shows like Agents of Shield and stuff. You didn't really have to watch it. It wasn't really strictly considered canon. You could get away with not watching it. Whereas
Hmm.
the Disney Plus series are canon and they do have important pieces of information. The Loki TV series, if you haven't watched that, you don't really have any clue about what's actually building up. Because that's where they first introduced Kang. But then there's now the issue where Jonathan Majors is a piece of shit and we
Right,
don't know
right.
what's going to happen with Kang. So it's kind of in a bit of a it's in a bit of a no man's land at the moment because they've done so many years of building these blocks towards the multiverse and the incursions, which if anyone's ever read the Jonathan Hickman Avengers run, they'll know that the incursions were basically alternate universes bouncing and destroying each other because of a cataclysmic event. And that's what led to the sort of revamped Secret Wars, which then in a sense essentially rebuilt and allowed them to do a soft reboot of the Marvel comic universe by bringing in characters from different continuities. And it seems like that's Marvel's aim is to because they have all these rights to all these characters back now who don't exist in this canon. So they're bringing the multiverse stuff so that they can essentially soft reboot the Marvel universe and kind of use whatever characters they want to use they never really had full access to before now. That's what it seems like the way that it's going, and they've been building up to that for a long time. The problem now is that the whole idea was that it was going to be Kang that was going to cause these incursions, whether or not they just recast Jonathan Majors or now they decide to do something else. It's hard to say. We don't really know. It's all kind of up in the air. And there was recent comments from the CEO of Disney saying they're going to start cutting down on the amount of content that they're making, which I'm a big fan of because it seems like for the last couple of years it's all been more about quantity over quality.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that they should be doing that. The problem now is that there's just so much shit up in the air in terms of different series that have been greenlight, different films that are in various stages of production that now potentially, have plot points that are going to go nowhere. Because the sort of end game, end goal of this arc has now changed. But who's to say? We won't really know for a couple of years.
And by that time, I'm sure a lot of people won't care. But I mean, hopefully there's some good stuff coming out. Also, I'm an idiot. This is what I get for not reading comics growing up. I read Thunderbolts and I thought it was Thunderbirds, that British puppet TV show.
What?
And I was like, how the
Oh,
hell are they going to get that in the MCU?
Chris was
Okay.
like, "This
okay.
is gonna get wild."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I grew up on Thunderbirds. I loved that show growing
Oh
up.
yeah, Thunderbirds is dope. Yeah.
Um, they, yeah. Anyways, Thunderbolts makes more sense. It's just another series of
Yeah,
comics.
Thunderbolts is basically a group of anti-heroes slash villains who were sort of put together as kind of like it's kind of like the MCU's version of the Suicide Squad.
Okay, okay,
Essentially, it's
okay.
it's their version of the Suicide Squad. So that's what that story is going to be. But that's been having some production issues as well. So who knows what's going to happen with that?
Oh, interesting.
Hopefully
I
it
guess they
happens because
shouldn't have
Harrison
fucked up their time
Ford.
with Gunn.
Yeah, Harrison Ford is going to be. Oh no, wait, no, sorry, he's going to be in. Well, he's playing Thunderbolt Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, so I assume he's going to be in the Thunderbolts. He's definitely in the new Captain America movie. He's taken over from the role that oh crap, what was his name? He died a couple of years ago.
Wait,
Uh,
sorry, who's taking over?
Harrison Ford is going to be in the MCU in the new Captain America movie. What was the guy? That's the actor's name. I feel like such an asshole.
He's
Um,
taking over for an older gentleman who was in the MCU?
yes, William Hurt.
R.I.P. to
So
William Hurt.
yeah.
Oh,
I
okay,
knew it
okay.
wasn't John Hurt. I was thinking in my head, John Hurt. I was like, no, it's not John Hurt. Yeah, he's taken over for William Hurt as Thaddeus Ross, who's Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross. So in the comics, he was the one who became Red Hulk and formed the Thunderbolts, this kind of anti-Avengers made up of villains. Harrison Ford has taken over for him.
Okay, okay,
So.
okay.
Anyway,
Interesting.
let's stop talking about Marvel movies. Um,
What have y'all been
any
watching?
Yeah, I can go. I haven't watched much other than Kubrick movies, but I did watch something different last night. How familiar are you guys with the Hell House LLC franchise?
I've seen the first two. I think they've made like a couple more after that, but I've seen the first two.
Hmm.
I've heard these
What
are
about you,
sneaky
Chris?
good.
Yeah, so I'm a huge fan of the first one. I think the first one's fantastic.
Huh.
Really cool found footage slash
Yeah.
mockumentary film. I haven't seen two or three because I've heard they're bad, so I just didn't watch them. But I've heard that the new one, which is kind of like a prequel slash sequel, was really good. I say new one; it came out a couple of months ago, at the end of last year. I heard it was really good, and it was like a prequel slash sequel, and you didn't have to watch two and three to kind of get it. So I said, "Screw it, I'll just watch it." I was on Shudder. So this is Hell House LLC Origins, the Carmichael Manor, and like I don't get scared, guys. I don't get scared of horror movies, but these Hell House LLC movies just freak me the fuck out. They really freak me out. I was scared walking around my house last night.
Damn.
Um, Neve asked me to go get her a bottle of water before bed, and I was like, I don't know if I want to go downstairs. It's dark down there. These films are just really effective. But what I really appreciate them is that they're not just your run of the mill spooky, paranormally found footage. There's so much lore. They put the writer and the director, same guy, he put so much work into like developing the lore and the story and the backstories and has created this really cool, interesting world. So I really appreciate the amount of effort that like I said, it's not just your run of the mill jump scare fest. Like there are jump scares, it is freaky, but there is a lot of thought and a lot of heart went into the creation of these movies, which I really appreciate. I'm gonna have to watch two and three, even though I know they're bad. I feel like I have missed some pieces. There are some references in this fourth one that I felt like maybe I was a little bit out of the loop. I wasn't really 100% getting it, so maybe two and three can clear those up. But I definitely recommend the first one, Chris. It's on they're all on Shudder. Um, First one is really really good. Like I said, I can't speak for two and three, but this fourth one is also really really good. I had a good time watching it.
That's awesome. Okay.
Two isn't great. I'll be honest, at least not
Yeah,
from
I've
my
heard that.
memory. But yeah, I don't know about three, but yeah, I meant to get to them because I have heard the same thing you have, that the new one is really really good, and I just like that means I gotta watch them. I gotta rewatch them, and I really don't want to watch two and three. So I was like, I'll get around to it. Maybe I'll do that this October or something. I'll try to make a point to get through them.
So
Yeah,
he
like I
has.
said, I watched four and I was able to enjoy it. Like I said, I felt like maybe there might have been a little bit more context if I'd seen two and three, but I had no issue jumping straight to four if you're wanting to just do that without having to watch two and three. I don't
So
think you'd
this
miss out on
guy,
too much.
this guy did three shorts and then directed Hell House LLC and then did two and then three and now four, I guess.
Hmm.
And then upcoming is a movie called Forest Road, which doesn't feel like it's part of the franchise. But I wonder if we could get him on the podcast. It seems like this would be an interesting guy to talk to, huh?
Well, yeah,
Stephen Cognetti.
I would be very much up for that. As I very much enjoy the effort he's put into into these found footage movies.
I see him like doing podcasts and seeming like promoting his stuff. So we should see if he can come on. It'd be fun. There's an uptick in maybe because of the circles we run in with a lot of the boutique, like Diabolic DVD. That guy Jesse's been all over how much he loves found footage movies, and
Hmm.
Well Liberty's talked about it. I feel like there's more and more conversation about how good some of these found footage movies are.
I
So
feel
maybe
like it's like Adam's talking about, like he gets scared watching them. I mean, even from a personal experience, there's something about, there's like a realism to it. Like it's
Yeah,
yeah,
harder to
yeah,
disconnect yourself from it. Like I still
100%.
think Blair Witch Project is like nothing happens, and that's the thing about Blair Witch too, like found footage. The less that happens, the scarier it is. Like
right,
I
100%.
still think Blair Witch Project is terrifying, and nothing
Yeah,
happens in that whole movie.
yeah.
right. Even
Scary as
I just saw Ju-on, which is not technically found footage, but it has that same feel of like taking a camcorder into a house and where crazy shit is happening. And they did that movie is the lower the budget that series had, the better they were. Those first two, they were SOV, were awesome and pretty freaky, and then it got less scary as they got into 35 millimeter cameras. I mean, I think it's like a there's something about that where it feels like you're actually just you can imagine yourself there with a phone or a camera, like a camcorder or something, like right there, you know?
Hmm. Yeah,
And
it
I think
is
that's a
very
mistake a
effective.
lot of found footage make, is they start showing like these like extraordinary or supernatural things on camera, and it kind of like, at least for me, it just like takes me out. I'm like, okay,
Mm-mm.
this that sense of this could happen is gone, and it doesn't mean you can't do it. Like paranormal, the first Paranormal Activity, of course, has things on camera, but they don't go over the top at that point
No,
yet.
it's
Right.
extremely effective movie.
Hmm.
Extremely effective.
Interesting. Okay. I'll have to see if we can't get him on.
Yeah. Away from that, I don't know if you guys saw the slate, the Radiance announced for May.
Oh, hell yeah.
I think there's something that tickles all of our tastes with this. There's three announcements they've done. The first is a movie that only came out, I believe, like last year or the year before. It's a very, very new film. And it immediately piqued my interest because it was described as a Latin American Twin Peaks. It's called Trenque Lequien. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Um, Seems really interesting. It's 4 hours long, but from what I was reading, it was because it was split into two parts. So it's like a two-part film.
Mm,
Um, Sounds super interesting. The next one looks really dope because it's in this nice big kind of limited edition box, kind of like their Messiah of Evil set, and it's
yeah.
a Mario Bava film, Vampires, Planet of the Vampires, sorry.
Yeah. Planet of Vampires.
Um, Planet of Vampires. The box looks so good. It
Yeah.
looks The artwork is just phenomenal. I've heard really good things about this movie for a long time, so I'm definitely picking that up. And then they're also doing a box set called Shinobi, which is basically a collection of three ninja movies, basically
Yep.
Band of Assassins, Revenge, and Resurrection. Um, which also looks great. So once again, as always, with every Radiance announcement, I'll be picking up all of them.
Uh-huh.
But I'm really looking forward to this. This is one of the sort of best slates, or the slate I've been most excited about for a while. Like I've been picking up everything that they've been buying, but like this May slate has me super excited. I'm really
Yeah.
looking forward to picking them up.
Yep.
You know, I was just looking up what you were talking about because I wanted to add it to my watch list. The Latin American Twin Peaks.
Mhm.
So I'm guessing it's the 2022 one. I'm curious. There's like a short that the director apparently did like right after it. That's 12 minutes long. That came out a year later. I guess in Twin Peaks fashion, it's kind of confusing what else included.
Yeah, I'm just having a look on the yeah, it does include a short film by the same name, this set as well. So I guess maybe it's a companion piece or something. Um, but look, this is what will pique your interest anyway, Zach, if I read you this sentence. The film's playful mystery and approach to genre has been compared to Twin Peaks and The Endless. So there you go.
Yeah, at least they didn't say it's about a this murder mystery. Don't worry about it. Just watch him wrestle with his models the entire movie. Then I'd been a little upset.
Um, there's a this Shinobi movies. They're in Japanese. They're called Shinobi. So he's paying respect to the Japanese title, but in the U.S. they just literally called Ninja. So like the first movie is a Band of Assassins, and it was released just literally as Ninja, a Band of Assassins. But these movies are awesome. In fact, I know that we're not necessarily uh, Zach, you still haven't seen a Bond movie, but this one is credited for influencing. Let me see if I can find it quickly. One of the Bond movies. Anyways, yeah, this is a. You Only Live Twice. Yeah, but this is a very influential movie. I've never seen Revenge or Resurrection, so it'll be fun to revisit those. But yeah, like you said, these movies are just awesome. And I think, have y'all seen Planet of the Vampires before?
No,
It's been on my
heard of it.
list, but I haven't. No.
Okay, because I like the fact that people can get to know Bava for more than just a straight horror guy. It's his special effects work. He's kind of like the Italian Ray Harryhausen, really, right? Um, as far as being sort of this like special effects maestro. So it'll be fun to. I think there's horror in this one, but I don't think it's a straight horror. I think there's elements of sci-fi and stuff in it. Um, so I'm excited for this one.
Anyone else have anything to want to shout out about before we talk about our feature presentations?
Yeah, so I figured since I needed to bring a little bit of culture back, since right now all we have is the MCU and some found footage. I thought I would talk about a true auteur and talk about me watching Michael Bay.
Oh
Um,
God,
I can say that he's in the Criterion Collection
that's
twice.
fine. We
How
have
many
this yet.
directors have been in the Criterion Collection twice? He's in a very elite group. But no, I watched Ambulance, which came out in like 2022 or 2021. I can't remember. It was during COVID. That movie's awesome. Like that is way better than I expected it to be. It's like a Tony Scott movie,
Dang.
but with like Bayham.
And with
And
worse dialogue.
honestly, like probably like from a director standpoint of the stuff I've seen from Bay, it's probably some of like the best camera work I've seen from him. He used a lot of drone stuff, and it looks really, really good. Because like a lot of times when you see drones, it's like a slow shot underneath this like forest with like a road in the middle of it, like with a car going up it or something. He's like going to the top of buildings and then just like falling down and like following these cars like you're running next to them. It's honestly like really impressive. Um, and story wise, it works for him because it was a story that was made in like the 80s in France because it's Bay. Of course he's sitting there thinking he can do it better, and he may have because it's a French film, so yeah, it works pretty good. Dynamics good. The acting is surprisingly really good. Jake Gyllenhaal is playing a psychotic, and he's really good at that. So
I was going to ask if that was a Jake Gyllenhaal movie because it does sound vaguely familiar.
yeah, it's him and the guy who played in the new Candyman movie. They're in it together, and essentially like the his brother, it's like it's his adopted brother basically. Just got out of the military. He can't get like experimental surgery for his wife, so he goes and asks his brother for money, and it's like right. He's like, well, I need your help on a heist. So if you want some money, come with me. And they end up in a ambulance with hostages with $16 million as they like drive through LA, and of course they're refusing to stop. So it does end up like Unstoppable or taking, Pelham 123 or something like that. So I actually highly recommend it. I watched it twice over the last 2 days. I watched it by myself while I was feeling a little sick. And then I was like, yeah, my girlfriend would love this movie. So we watched it last night.
I think we talked about how early Michael Bay is probably his best work, like Bad Boys and like Con Air. Or, wait, The Rock.
The Rock.
And I think that what I've heard is that the ambulance kind of feels like he's getting back to that a little bit. Like there's no alternate universe and robots and Transformers and all that. He's just like, I don't know, he's just like getting back to his roots of sort of like thrilling stories. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, it feels like I think Tony Scott is always a good comparison for that because it feels like a highly stylized '90s action movie, but more modern in the fact that like I said, he can do the drone stuff, and the drone stuff looks fantastic. Like the way that's cut together and how fast that like drone works, and it makes everything like appear as like one shot in this high end action stuff. And I give credit to any movie. You'll have plenty of jokes, Chris. I know, but there's a part where they drive through the LA River, the same part like where Terminator 2 takes place, and they use part of the Terminator 2 soundtrack.
Of course they do.
Part. I was like, the Michael Bay and James Cameron joke will write itself for Chris.
Because they're the same person. But
well, that's what I was just going to say. Like we shouldn't be surprised that this film, has highly stylized shots. This is coming from the same guy who made Titanic, which is incredibly highly stylized.
Fuck you so much.
Technical marvels.
He probably invented something just to go on the streets of LA.
Yeah, he invented LA.
He invented LA.
He funded the city of LA just to shoot movies.
Yeah.
Michael Cameron can do
tracks for me.
But we've gotten to the best we will talk about. I guess we should get to this Kubrick guy for a little bit.
Cool. So as we talked about last week, we're going to be talking about 3 Stanley Kubrick films today. We're going to start off in the year 1960. This was when Stanley Kubrick made a film called Spartacus, which nobody's ever heard of. It's a small indie film. I don't think anybody's ever heard of Spartacus or the name Spartacus before. But the letterboxd description reads as follows: the rebellious Thracian. Oh God, this is very. I should have picked Zach to read this. The rebellious Thracian Spartacus, born and raised a slave, is sold to gladiator trainer Batius. Batius.
I actually know this because I saw the Spartacus show. It's the only reason I know it.
After weeks of being trained to kill for the arena, Spartacus turns on his owners and leads the other slaves in rebellion. As the rebels move from town to town, their numbers swell as escaped slaves join their ranks. Under the leadership of Spartacus, they make their way to the southern Italy, where they will cross the sea to return to their homes. Okie dokie. I had never seen Spartacus before. I am aware of this I am Spartacus meme. But I'd never seen Spartacus before. I believe both of you guys had seen this film before from what we had talked about. So I can give my initial reaction to it.
You should.
Spartacus is a film that I respect more than I like. It's so fucking long. I knew I was in for a tough time. I always knew. I always know when I'm in for a tough time when a film starts with an overture. Like, oh God!
Like,
fuck! Here we go.
It's even worse when it's a long movie. You're telling me this could have been another hour if you didn't just sum this shit up right here.
Yeah. Like, I went and got some snacks and came back and the overture was still going. I knew I had time. I knew I would have time to do that because anytime I've seen any film with an overture, it's always like 3 or 4 minutes of a song.
Oh yeah.
It's like, Jesus Christ. Okay. So the film is very long. It's very, very long. I don't know if it has to be as long, I'm not gonna go into try and pick apart what they could have done and what they couldn't have done. To be fair, I think most of the time the film is actually doing stuff that serves the plot. I don't think it's very meandering or anything like that. So I'm not one to say that they should have done this and they should have done that. Um, to be positive about the film, as I said, I respect films like this, films that put so much effort into the set design, the costumes, the production, everything.
Hmm.
These kind of epic films, I really do respect the filmmaking behind them because there is so much time and effort that goes into recreating, this sort of historical era, not just with the costumes, but with all the sets and finding really great expansive, areas of land to film on that are kind of untouched by modern society and stuff. I really, really do respect the hell out of the filmmaking with this. Um, but yeah, this film's a bore. It's boring. It's very long. It's boring. It's quite dry. Um, and it it doesn't really have a whole lot of personality. It feels very cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Um, like if you sat down and watched this film and you didn't know the Stanley Kubrick film, say you skipped the credits, like you would never have known. This feels just kind of like a run of the mill, kind of, just standard studio piece. There's no real personality with the
It
film at all.
it feels like the only time, and this counts as even his first two, where I feel like this is a director for hire gig, which it is. But it's like the
Yeah.
only time I'm like, oh yeah, this is anybody could have done this. It's just whoever they just got to hire who at least knew their way around a camera.
Yeah, it does. It feels like that. One could say, to tie this into our earlier conversation, one could say this was Kubrick's MCU film.
Yeah.
If we want to put it that way.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I'll give my thoughts since they kind of bleed into yours a bit, Adam. The story of Spartacus is a pretty cool story. It's been very influential. I watched the Stars TV show. That was really my first introduction to the story and like in depth before I looked into it myself. And that's way more like a lot more blood, a lot more. It's very HBO-ish. I guess say a lot of blood, a lot of tits, like sort of thing. Exciting as it can be. And
Sold.
yeah, and I mean, it really should be because, like, you're talking about a story where these slaves, from nothing came up and tried to fight against the most powerful military in the world. And that's just cool as hell. That's like just an awesome story. And somehow they took that really, really cool story and said, how boring can we tell this? And that is how I felt the entire time watching Spartacus. I'm like, it looks pretty at times. The color's really nice.
They are nice.
Yeah, it's better than his first two movies, and that's really where my like praise is at. Like, I would probably never rewatch this unless I don't know, I wanted to give it a second chance, but it's just like I was like bored to tears watching it.
Yeah. I'm going to echo. This is going to be a hate fest. The I feel like I should say we are in the minority when it comes to critics who are talking about Spartacus. It is currently 958 on the They Shoot Pictures Top 1000.
Jesus, that's so
Jesus,
high.
are you serious?
Yep. I wish I was not.
I swear they just feel bad because of what happened to Trumbo. Like it's like we got to throw him a bone because of everything that happened.
Well, no, I mean, I think this was the movie that saved his career, not the other way around, right? This is that's actually probably the interesting part of the story. But it's up by American in Paris. It's up by Near Dark, which I agree, Near Dark is a better movie. I would put it more than 2 spots ahead of Spartacus. But what else is interesting? It's up by Luc Besson's Leon, The Professional. A History of Violence, American Beauty. Anyways, so this they wanted to hire David Lean for this, and he turned it down. And to me, that feels like it would have been a better movie with
That
David
makes
Lean.
so much more
Yeah,
sense.
yeah, it
This
seems more
makes
like a
so
lean
much
movie.
sense. It
Yeah,
does. It does. It has those Lawrence of Arabia vibes.
totally. He should have directed this. Then they gave it to Anthony Mann to direct, which I thought was interesting.
That name's
And
familiar. What did he make?
he's more of an actor, to be honest. But I'm sure he did directed some movies too. Let's see. Oh wait, no, he is. I guess he's more of a director, but he's famous for a lot of westerns. Let's see. What are the big movies that he did? He did T-Men, which let's see, The Furies, which is a popular western. He did The Furies, The Tall Target, The Naked Spur. Um, anyways,
See, what doesn't make sense is they already had the best director they could have in the cast. They should have just got Charles Lawton to come out of retirement from directing, say, you know what, man, give it a second go, and just direct the
dude,
film for us.
Charles Laughton's Spartacus would have been phenomenal. I guess Anthony Mann's probably most famous for Cimarron or El Cid. Those are probably his two most famous films. But the the interesting thing to me about this is that it's not a Kubrick movie. It's a Kirk Douglas movie.
Yeah, oh, yeah, it's a vehicle for him for
For
And,
sure.
sure.
and
Yeah.
he was a
100%.
producer too. Like he was the one that fired Anthony Mann after a week saying he didn't get it. He was the one, so Kubrick apparently wanted to take credit for the screenwriting in order to help with the blacklisting thing. And Kirk Douglas was quote unquote so appalled at the idea that he is like, no, that's it. Trumbo's coming back on Hollywood. So he like there's a big like historic day where he went to the security gate and he said, here's a pass for Dalton Trumbo, please. And then he came in and that was the first time he walked on the lot with his own name in like 10 years. Um, and the studio let him do it, which is kind of cool. Like they let him use his name, and Kennedy was president at the time, and he came across what I guess you would call like picket lines, whatever the metaphor for that is for something that's blacklisted, and publicly went and saw this movie in theaters, kind of ending the blacklist. So, like the historical significance of this film is awesome. And like what it represents in Hollywood is awesome because the blacklist was so dumb. But Kubrick being a part of it is almost a second thought. It's almost like a byproduct, right? It's like this is hardly a Kubrick film.
No, that's what I meant when I said that. Like, I wasn't really being too silly when I said that this is like Kubrick's MCU film. I did mean that from the perspective of this was a producer's film, and he was there to make sure,
Yeah,
as Zach said earlier, he knew how to work a camera, he knew how to set up shots, he knew how to direct actors. But in terms of the vision, there's no sort of altruistic stamp. Like, there's nothing that you can really pinpoint to say this is a Kubrickism. And this is still fairly early in his career, to be fair. A lot of the stuff that we associate with Kubrick still wouldn't rear their head for a few
yeah,
more films. Um, but yeah, the Kubrick aspect of it, it does feel like it's purely a director for hire. He was there because obviously Kirk Douglas had worked with him in Paths of Glory, so obviously he knew his style, he knew how he worked. Let's get him in here. We know that we work well together. Shoot this camera, do this, do that. This is the vision. This is how we want to shoot it. And Cooper was like, okay, I'm sure you'll pay me lots of money to do this, and then I can go make some other cool films after this. So
Which he
it,
does.
but he does.
which
So it does feel like, it feels like that moment when a big actor or a big director gets their Marvel paycheck and everyone's going, whoa, I wonder why the hell they're going to do a Marvel movie. And then you realize afterwards that this allows them to go and make whatever the hell they want afterwards because they're not really stuck for the money. Um,
Kubrick
so
selling out before it was cool.
yeah, essentially he was, yeah, that's what it feels like. And I don't mean that in a bad way or anything like that. But that's how this looks. Or that's how it comes across to me anyway.
I actually love the analogy of the MCU. I think you nailed it. It it's true on so many levels, right? Like imagine the budget for Paths of Glory was under $1 million, and then he walks into at the time a $12 million budget, which is about $100 million today.
Jesus.
And there's 10,000 extras, and it's this grand tale, and he's 30 years old.
And I don't know if Kubrick was interested in it this time, but I mean, he was very interested in a Napoleon script So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if this was something he was already considering, it could be like, well, this will help me when I eventually get to do that.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True. 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 Yeah. His later in his career, especially after Barry Lyndon, which I know we're not at yet, but I would love to have seen his Napoleon um, after he kind of got his legs under him. But anyways, um, this is there's the other interesting thing I think to talk about from the movie, which is otherwise pretty quite boring and dry, was uh, the way that the the Romans were sort of very open uh, in their like trying to think of the way to say it like sexuality with any across any gender, right? Like they I don't know if they use the term homosexual or if I just don't think it mattered from what I understand. You had sex with women or you had sex with men or whatever. They were just more open in that way, right?
Yeah,
At the top.
there's a lot of homoeroticism in this movie, like top of that scene in like the bathhouse and stuff like that. Um and like it's just played completely normal. It's not like a Michael Bay thing where they're making fun of it. It's just played like completely normal, like this is just part of the everyday life. Which is pretty cool for a 1960s movie.
Yeah, and I almost wonder if it needed someone like Kubrick and Kirk Douglas, who were both fairly progressive, to like kind of pull that out and make it just normal, like not make a big deal out of it.
Yeah, and it's not like it's super subtextual either. Like anybody who like it's not like it's a thing that like they snuck past the censors through subtext or whatever. It's all
Yeah,
it's pretty all on the nose. It's I don't think anybody like if this was a thing that snuck past the censors and the censors realized afterwards going, oh, how do we put this out? The morality, please, blah blah blah. You would think, well, did you just like not watch the movie? Were you asleep during that part? Like I
right,
get it if you were asleep, but like surely that shouldn't if this is your job, you probably shouldn't be sleeping during Spartacus. It's okay for us to sleep during Spartacus, but um understandable even, but not if it's your job.
right. Yeah. And what's the oysters and snails, right? Is the big scene where they're barely hiding that they're talking about basically having sex with either gender, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Right. Or with any gender, like it doesn't matter. Just it's like you have oysters and snails both. So it had this like cool backstory of breaking up the blacklist, and it was mostly Kirk Douglas that drove that, but Kubrick gets to have his name attached. It had a silly like size of budget given the fact that like at the time it was kind of this like project that could have either just fallen apart at any given time if they didn't allow it to go through. Um, but and then it had this cool progressive like writing at times, but then just I don't know, like the rest of the movie's just kind of not that interesting.
It's one of those cases of the story around the movie is better than the movie itself. Like
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can't write the history of film probably without Spartacus,
yeah,
No.
but that's really all it is. It's a part of history that is more interesting than the movie it is. Like I mean, any movie that helps break up the communism blacklist didn't matter. The quality was going to be a big deal.
yeah,
In this case, of course, it took something like the equivalent of $100 million movie and a bunch of high end people. I mean, you look at the cast. There's a lot of big names in that cast.
Yeah.
A lot of people are, and it probably does speak to the frustration a lot of them were feeling about the fear of being blacklisted for being accused of communist.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have that willingness to do it. But yeah, I mean, I don't even know really to say about the movie that isn't, just droning on about stuff I found boring about it. Like,
Yeah.
that's always the bad part. It's like, yeah, they're the chemistry between Kirk Douglas and what was her name?
Gene Simmons, right?
Gene Simmons, yeah.
Yeah, it's really boring.
Oh
Not Gene
yeah.
Simmons from Kiss. Gene spelled like jeans.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of queer subtext.
Yeah.
Um,
But it's like that running joke where, Hearts of Darkness is better than Apocalypse Now. But like a documentary about the making of Spartacus probably would be better than Spartacus.
oh
Yeah,
yeah,
and at least
100%.
people still watch Apocalypse Now, like to just
Yeah.
watch it.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like it would be better. I guess just one thing I'm thinking about then in terms of why make a Spartacus movie now? Like what's what was the driving force behind making this? Like obviously it's an interesting story and stuff. But as we talk a little bit more about the blacklisting aspect of it, there is that it is kind of almost again maybe sort of a thinly veiled poke at standing up for those who are blacklisted. We talk about that I'm Spartacus scene where
Huh?
everybody stands up to say I'm Spartacus, to try and defend the guy that's accused of liberating them. One could say contextually, this is kind of like people in Hollywood now standing up for those who were blacklisted to try and sort of liberate them.
No,
Maybe I'm
I
just
actually I actually
grasping
like
at
that. Yeah,
nothing.
like people rising up for what's right, that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I definitely think I mean, it's and if Trumbo is right in it. I mean, he's got to have some feelings about that at the
yeah, for
time.
sure.
Um, it's you could maybe argue that it could be tone deaf if not done correctly. Like you see that now where people equate themselves to like Holocaust survivors or something, and it's like it's not quite that bad. But I get what you're saying.
Yeah, the funny thing is, not speaking of the Holocaust, but speaking of other eras in American history where prohibition was enacted in some form. They had these speakeasies in New York with alcohol, right? Trumbo worked the whole time. He just used a different name and like nobody double checked. So like, the blacklist was just a farce and it was dumb and nobody really cared. It was like just a show, right? Political show. Um, and that became obvious as we go along. Most of these people were still working. So, but I think the having Kennedy come in and say, like, no, I'm going to go see this movie and I support what Kirk Douglas is doing was huge, right? Um, just from a cultural standpoint. So yeah. Anyways, I don't really have too much else to say other than by the time you get to the third hour, and there's that scene where Charlton Heston is racing in his souped up, what's it called, chariot. That reminded me a lot of Star Wars Phantom Menace. I'm sure Lucas pulled
Go
from
on.
this. No,
George Lucas being inspired by older movie? I don't. That doesn't track. That doesn't
I mean,
track for me.
it's like scene for scene at times, right? Like it's I will forever associate these two in my head. Um, and I feel like it's probably not the only movie that this inspired as far as like racing goes, violent racing goes. But a slave being freed through racing, kind of, I don't know. There's a lot of connections there.
Uh, okay, yeah, I think you've cracked. I think you've cracked that Phantom Menace Spartacus connection. Phantom Menace is a better movie.
100%.
But yeah.
100%. I don't even like the middle trilogy or whatever, but this is it. Phantom Menace is way better than Spartacus. I'm fine with that.
Finally, a good take on this podcast. It's been a long time. Any more thoughts on Spartacus?
Just watch Gladiator. It's shorter and it's a lot more fun.
That's
That
true.
sounds fair. That sounds fair. Cool. So after Kubrick secured the bag and made Spartacus, 2 years later he made what's probably his most controversial film, just in terms of the subject matter and things like that. In 1962, he decided to make a film adaptation of a Vladimir Nabokov book called Lolita. Um, I'll read the letterbox description, which is Humbert Humbert is a middle-aged British novelist who is both appalled by and attracted to the vulgarity of American culture. When he comes to stay at the boarding house run by Charlotte Hayes, he soon becomes obsessed with Lolita, the woman's teenaged daughter. I anticipate this probably being our kind of most controversial one to talk about, just in terms of maybe different opinions and stuff. Like I've seen Zach's rating of this movie. I didn't check yours, Chris. I don't know if you even put it on your letterbox yet or anything.
Mm,
Um, but I think this might be good for discussion. Before we talk about the film itself, I'm just kind of curious. Have you either of you guys read the book?
no.
I have not. No.
Okay, I have. The book is fantastic. So I kind of knew what I was getting myself into in terms of the content of this film, in terms of what the plot points were going to be, how everything shapes. But I know the plot already, because I've read the book. Vladimir Nabokov, the author, is insanely good. He's an insanely good writer. He was, I believe, Eastern European or Russian, so he's from Eastern Europe
Russian,
anyway.
yeah, you're Russian, yeah.
But he wrote this book and other books in English. It's not like his works were translated, and he has such an incredible control over the English language, much better than most native English speakers. He's honest, like the book, despite how insanely horrific everything that happens in the book itself is so beautiful to read. The language that he uses, the way he controls prose is just stunning. It's an incredibly well written book, so I would recommend it. Despite, and again, it's kind of like the language and the prose is so ironically beautiful because everything that's actually in the actual content itself is so horrendous. So it's kind of has that kind of irony to it. But I would recommend the book for those interested. It's very, very well written. Um, Even if the content is hard. But I suppose we'll talk about the film itself. So this is my last film to check off my Kubrick watch list. I've now seen every Kubrick film. This is the one I left to last. I've seen them all now. Um, I don't really care all that much about this film. I don't think it's bad. I'm going to steer away from the content aspect of it for a moment because I'm sure we'll have plenty to say about the actual plot points and the content. I'm going to talk about the filmmaking for a minute. From a filmmaking point of view, I actually don't think it's all that special. There's the film leaves out a lot of stuff from the book that does help contextualize Humbert a little bit more. Um, Not saying that he's redeemable or anything, he's absolutely not, but the book does add more context about his backstory and kind of his it builds around his psychology and basically kind of like really tries to explain why he is how he is. Not defending it or anything, but just explaining why he is this way. So the book does a lot of heavy lifting on that part that the film doesn't, and the film's pacing I felt wasn't all that great either. Technically, I don't know if there's anything really to jump out at me. I didn't think any of the cinematography was particularly impressive. The only thing that I was kind of impressed about this movie were the performances. I think, all the acting is largely very good. Um, it's funny that in this is the second time in this podcast we're talking about Shelley Winters playing a character who does not do very well at protecting our children. Um, After Night of the Hunter.
That's funny.
But yeah, I think the cast is all very, very good, but largely unimpressed with the rest of the film. It's tonally a bit weird. There's the kind of moments of almost slapstick comedy, which I get are kind of there to try and level the playing field a little bit, because again, the main kind of plot point is so crude that having a little bit of levity here and there is is not a bad thing. But yeah, I find the film tonally weird, um, not very well structured, paced very weirdly, and just not technically anything to write home about. Maybe I'm being harsh, so I'm happy to hear what you guys thought of it.
Um, I, I can just go quickly just to say kind of placement in history and these things. This one is very beloved by film critics. It's all the way up at 745 on the They Shoot Pictures 1000.
Wow, that is crazy.
So it's hard to know with both Spartacus and Lolita if these had been made by a different director, would they be up so high? I mean, it's
Yeah, you
kind
can
of a
hear that.
silly game to play because who knows, right? But it wouldn't be the same movie and all those kind of things. But um, I, to me, I'm kind of more along your lines, um, Adam. I think that there are the parts that I think are very interesting and good about this movie are probably more tied to the novel being so good as opposed to the film itself. I did not expect there to be two movies where Peter Sellers goes off full ham and plays multiple characters in a slapsticky manner. Certainly did not expect it here. um, maybe, maybe seeing this again, knowing what it is versus what I expected it to be would help my opinion of it. I certainly didn't hate the movie. It was much easier to watch than Spartacus. Um, this will probably be like mid Kubrick for me at the end, but near the bottom half, not the top half.
See, you guys have put me in the worst situation where I have to be the one to defend the movie that's about a child predator.
No, but Zach, I'm gonna take your side on that part because actually, it's not really, or it is, but it's not in the way that it seems like it's going to be, right? And I think that actually is to the book's credit and the movie's credit. So I'm gonna come on your side of this in a second. Just purely from a filmmaking perspective, I think it has a lot to be desired. But the story is interesting, I think. So, anyways, you won't be alone on that. But go ahead, defend the movie part.
um, I go back to a lot of what you were saying, Adam, because there are a lot of things I agree with you with. Probably the main one is as far as like the directing, like the camera work, the cinematography. It's just kind of fine. It's not bad. It definitely doesn't have like a lot of the iconography you would kind of expect from Kubrick. It seems very toned down. It seems more of a vehicle for the writing and for the acting and the situation and things like that. More of a almost like a thought piece in a sense. Like because what year did this come out? 60 like two or something.
That's right. Yeah, 62.
62. I mean, it's to me, it's interesting to think that a movie like this made today would still be its own form of controversy, especially if it was made by like a pretty well known director, especially from the guy who made Spartacus apparently 2 years before this. At least had his name a little bit more out there, just because like, and especially in the sense where I know you were talking about Adam, you thought it was a little bit tonally weird. I like the tone of the film. I think because it's so serious and it's so dark of a subject that I actually thought that going through 2.5 hours of a borderline comedy was a lot more interesting and a lot more palatable than if it had just if it had went into like the more darkness of it, so to speak, because the darkness is kind of just always there because you're uncomfortable the entire time you're watching it. Like every interaction he has with Lolita, I just kind of felt like I sunk down in my chair and be like, this is okay, this is what we're gonna do, that's fine. So it's I don't know, I kind of like the tone, and I didn't really have as many issues with the pacing. I did think the scenes with, I guess, Peter Sellers. I'm trying to sit here and remember where like it's in the present. I guess you call the present day. I thought those were probably the slowest scenes, just because I don't know. At that point, the plot's already happened, and so you're just. I think it's going a little bit back and forth, or it starts at the beginning and at the end. But yeah, I thought those were probably the only parts that kind of stick out to me. The rest, I thought, kind of went by pretty quickly for especially how long the movie is.
Okay, maybe um, maybe there's a chance to just quickly talk about this. So, like, this was not a Spartacus was just a hard film to watch, right? Because of it's just so long and boring and like nothing happens. The funny thing is to me, this also felt like a studio film. Like this to me still didn't feel like a Kubrick film in the sense of what we're about to talk about in 20 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever, right? However, I will say I was dreading this movie. The technical term I think is hebophilia. Is that right?
Is
For
that yeah? I mean, yeah, pedophile is more of an umbrella, I guess. But if we're being technical, yeah.
And
I
I
don't know
have
my pedophile lore enough
no,
to.
no, no. It's
Yeah, it's a psychological thing. It's a difference between like prepubescent and pubescent teenagers. Essentially, is what it comes down to. It's not worth the distinction, I guess, technically, but yeah,
exactly,
that's
yeah.
yeah.
I hate to even spend time on it because, like, who really cares? But I just have such little interest in watching a movie about that. So I was like, okay. Um, but the thing that I think people should hear, and I'd be curious to hear y'all's opinion on this. That I feel like people should hear if they're like I was, and just kind of basically refuse to watch this movie because of the subject matter.
Yeah, 100%. That's why I left it
It
to last.
Yeah, like it's not it, and the first half of the movie is this kind of twisted male fantasy. And I was like, "Oh, God, I hate this so much." But as the movie progresses, it's not really a twisted male fantasy as much as it is, I think, a look into like obsession and a look into the dangers of like kind of predatory behavior and how obsessive and destructive it is. And I think the movie can be defended quite easily by the way that it goes because both James Mason and Peter Sellers are not depicted as having essentially any redeeming qualities, right?
No,
The movie spends no time defending them, or the story spends no time defending them, no time making it seem like they're right. And I actually think it goes out of the way to show how broken they are in the way that they shape their lives around this girl, right? So if you can kind of stomach the first hour of the movie from it, because luckily it doesn't show that much, like in terms of what's actually on screen, right? It
no.
implies a lot, and certainly the dialogue is there to. It's not like an assumption, like stuff happens, but it doesn't show it. And if you can get past that first hour or so and that twisted male fantasy part where I was really nervous it was going to go in the direction of somehow he was going to get his way, especially after the wife dies. I was like, oh God. But it doesn't go there. It goes and it treats it with respect, and I think it treats it with the horror that it deserves. And I'll kind of pause there for a second and let you all go. But there's more I have to say. But
Mhm.
Yeah, I feel like the movie. I don't think it quite commits to it, but sometimes I kind of felt like the way Humphreys is perceived is kind of like how Lolita can perceive him. Like he's at least he's despicable in his actions and as a person, but I won't sit there and say he's not isn't charming at times or likable at especially in the beginning, which can makes it feel like maybe how she can see him, and then he just kind of becomes slowly more pathetic as of course as she gets older um and as the movie progresses we kind of see him more as a lot more pathetic than anything else, especially towards the end until that kind of goes to the point where he becomes very dangerous, even to more of a degree than he already was. So I think sometimes it was trying to hit, especially when we talk about that first hour. I think it's trying to make the audience understand Lolita's maybe she's a child, so she can't like be mutually given. This is why this movie's so hard to talk about. She can't, while she may have like at least some mutual feelings back. Obviously she's the child and he's an adult. Children have uh crushes on older people when they're kids. That's a thing. But I think it does break that down as it goes.
Yeah, it's interesting, and some of this some of my feelings in this film are perhaps tainted by the fact that the book is so good, in terms of painting these characters and stuff like that. So I think that's perhaps where some of my sort of ill feelings are being stemmed from, is because I just think the book is better than the film. But one thing the film does, um, or just in general, the book and the film, but one thing the characters do and sort of the way it's shown is there's two things. As you said, yeah, like Humbert is not like he starts off just like a regular dude. He's just like a normal guy. Everyone seems to like him. He gets on with people. He just seems like your sort of normal guy. Which I suppose it's kind of important to show that this is how a lot of this stuff goes under the radar. That's how a lot of abuse goes under the radar because it's like everyone's thinking, no, it couldn't be him. He's just like the normal, nice professor. He's just a normal, regular dude. That's how a lot of abuse goes under the radar a lot of the time. It's not always the ones you most suspect. Um, but also and again, this is such a slippery slope and such a hard topic to discuss. But when it comes to like power dynamics, we always talk about that when it comes to relationships between much older and much younger people, and not just like illegal ones, but even like people, you see, people in like their 40s or 50s going out with like 22-year-olds and stuff like that. Still gross, but not illegal. There's always that talk of that. There's that power dynamic. Um, and as this film progresses, it's interesting because despite her being, the young girl in the scenario, it almost seems like Lolita is the one with all the power. Um, in a perspective that she manipulates Humbert's desires to kind of get whatever she wants, and he does anything she wants, buys her whatever she wants, and everything like that.
Right.
Um, and I think that's an interesting dynamic. It's a dangerous dynamic to kind of talk too much about, because at the end of the day, she is a child and he is the adult. There isn't a true power dynamic there. In reality, physically speaking, he could, control her in any way he wanted.
Hmm.
Um, but it does seem as though, and obviously it's sort of revealed towards the end. I don't know how much sort of spoilers we want to get into, but it does seem as though she was the one manipulating him the entire time, which is it's just interesting. I'm not going to say whether it's right or wrong to kind of depict that. It's an interesting dynamic, though.
Well, and I mean, it's one of those things that's tough because I think, it may go over this more in the book, and you can probably correct me on that. But I always got the feeling through the film that, part of the reason he could justify this to himself was that he would not look at himself as like a rapist because he's not forcing her in his mind. He's,
Right.
So to him, this is like just courting, or she's playing hard to get, or, she's being difficult. But, there's,
Hmm.
he's treating something that as much of a normal relationship as he can, no matter how abnormal it is. And I almost feel like he kind of prides himself in that in a sense. Like,
Hmm.
if he really wanted her, I mean, like you said, he has the physical, he's much older, he could do a whole lot. I hate to say worse because what he's doing is bad enough, but it could even be even darker or worse in the case than it already is.
Yeah, yeah. The the antithesis to this is American Beauty, right? Where there's temptation, but ultimately the adult sort of wakes up and realizes what he's doing. Um,
Which was almost not. I don't know if just fun fact about that. The ending was different originally, where he did sleep with the teenage girl. So thankfully they changed that one.
oh, interesting. No, I think it's a much more powerful movie when he restrains himself, especially given how much he's unrestrained internally. The whole movie is about his like this internal struggle he has, right? But he kind of, anyways, we don't have to get into that now. But the seeing, so if we think about this as a, um, uh, I should take a step back. So I was chatting with someone about this movie who's really good at research, and she was digging into Nabokov's life a little bit, and she pulled up some interesting information that he was abused by his grandfather, I believe, um, and sort of he came from an extremely wealthy family in Russia. So the grandfather was part of I think it was Alexander II's regime, and the dad was also in the military. Nabokov inherited a huge estate in Russia. So was upper class, aristocratic, very well educated, which plays into, like you said, Adam, his fluency with language in general is to be something that we all probably would desire to have, right? He's just a extremely intelligent person, well written, um, and so has this sort of this this danger of a man, a grown man, taking advantage of a child deep in his psyche, right? He said his quote was that this book was about um, how the profession of writing can overwhelm you and become an obsession. and it was a metaphor for that. Could have made that subject matter literally anything else. But
Go
knowing
big or
his
go home, I guess. If I make it difficult for myself, let's just go all in.
exactly, but knowing his background, maybe this was just something that was on his mind, and maybe apparently his the other some of the other novels that has written have that dynamic between a teenage boy and an older man and abuse. So it seems like it was very top of mind, and it was mm, given the context of sort of who he was, not unsurprising that he used this dynamic to get across a greater point. Um, I just wanted to call that out. Not from a defending it, but more just from a like putting context around it, right? Um, the thing that I thought was interesting was by the last 30 minutes of the movie, we saw James Mason, who, by the way, did y'all pick up on this? That has to be the voice that James Mason has to be the voice that uh, Stewie in Family Guy is based off of, right?
I did not pick up on that.
I
No.
will next time I watch it. I guess I'll try to pick up on that.
All I could hear was Stewie, and not wait, yeah, Stewie.
The baby.
I'm just trying to remember. Brian doesn't have a
No,
British accent. It's only the
no,
baby,
no,
right?
no, you
Yeah.
are 100%
Okay.
right.
I just want to
And
make sure.
you just unlocked a core. I'm a big Family Guy fan. I watched Family Guy so much growing up. I'm a
Uh-huh.
massive Family Guy fan. And I
Uh-huh.
actually forgot to talk about this during any other business. Seth MacFarlane has a TV show now of Ted, the movie he made with the talking bear.
Uh-huh.
And that TV show is so good. It's like stupid funny. It is way better than it has any right to be. But you've just unlocked a memory where I think I have read that before. Is there something to do with James Mason and Family Guy? I don't think it's the voice, but I'm 99% sure that James Mason's face is the inspiration for Quagmire with
That's
the
awesome.
chin. I'm 99% sure of this. I don't know if I'm making this up, but I'll need to try and there's a connection somewhere between James Mason and Family Guy, and I'll try and figure it out in the
Hilarious.
meantime. Sorry, but I'll let you get back to what you were saying.
No, I I couldn't unhear that once it clicked for me. I was just like, damn it, this is just Stewie. Um, but I do think if you were to again, it's very hard to set aside the subject matter because it's so uncomfortable. But if you were to look at this as a metaphor for obsession, it's a pretty damn good story, right? Like Peter Sellers is played as a comedic character in the film, but Zach, you were talking about how the film could have gotten worse and more dark. That's what Peter Sellers wanted. He was the dark version of this obsession, right? He wanted her to appear in art movies, and he
Mm.
basically kidnapped her, and he followed her around, and he took her um, interest in him to extremely unhealthy levels, and to the point where he based his life around her, but was had nothing positive as far as he only had selfish interest with her, right?
Mhm.
And all of that happens off screen, but is horrifying if you think about the life that she had when she ran away from James Mason at the hospital. James Mason was equally perverted and um, um, destructive to her and to himself. But in his mind, he was doing it in an honorable way. Like there's a scene where he's painting her toenails. And it's this interesting dialogue where he's pleading her to like not see boys her own age or people her own age, not go to parties with them. But he's coming from a place of like a whiny boyfriend. And he even says, like, I do everything for you. I cook for you, clean for you, blah blah blah, right? So like he's just this like pitiful, broken man who I can't quite figure out where his obsession with Lolita started from, but that's a different point. I mean, not even like don't be attracted to teenage girls, which is true, but like I don't think the movie does a good job of establishing the attraction in the first place.
Hmm.
It just
The
it just
the
shows her
book
in the
does that a
garden.
lot better. Yeah,
The
the
book
book
does it better.
the book provides so much like I can give you the context of like why he is how he is if you would like, if that would help you kind of understand the film, I guess, a little bit more, or the character a little bit more.
I think
Um,
so. Yeah.
so essentially, Humbert, when he was young, he was on holidays, I believe, maybe in France or somewhere in Europe anyway. And, when he was like, 10, 11, 12, whatever, he basically had his first crush, this girl that he liked, and, she was his age, and it was like his first love. And she got sick and died. And it basically just created this like weird mental block where he had this like unfulfilled love. His first like unfulfilled love essentially stuck with him, so that's why he's attracted to girls like 12, 13, 14, because that was the age that this kind of trauma happened to him. So that's the kind of explanation as to why he is how he is. Obviously, I'm not defending it or anything, but that's how the book establishes why he has this kind of attraction. This kind of, when he had this sort of trauma when he was so young with the sort of first girl he had ever sort of been attracted to or in love with, kind of died suddenly.
I would say it's, yeah, go ahead, Zach.
No, I think it's going to tie into what you're saying, Chris. I think I wonder if when they were doing the screenplay and directing this and making choices for it, if they elected to disregard it just in a fear that if you like, I'm sure it's great in the book. Like from everything I've heard about the book, it's fantastic. It handles the subject matter so incredibly well. But if you screw that up, it would look like a sympathy piece more than it would look like an excuse more than an explanation.
Yeah, you don't want to rationalize the unrational.
Yeah, and I wonder if that was part of their fears. Like, okay, at the end of the day, the dude is a pedophile or whatever you want to call him. Do we for this movie? Do we need to know more than that? That he's just attracted to 12-year-olds, that sort of thing. It would be interesting because I wonder how Kubrick later in his film when he's much more established, he takes much more risk. If he'd be would he make a completely different movie that follows the book? Though I'm sure we'll get into this the further we go with Kubrick. He's not the biggest on following books one-to-one.
True.
We'll get that a lot. So it is interesting.
But he has publicly stated that if he had known how much the censors would have intervened, he would have not made this movie.
Oh, I can't imagine how bad that was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, because this was
the
still
tagline was literally, "How did they even make a movie of Lolita?" That was literally the tagline.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at like the psychology element. Like, we talked about it before on like the end of Psycho. You have just a psychologist character coming in just to explain what's going on, and this is 2 years before this movie. This is kind of a tough subject to get around psychologically for a bunch of people who probably aren't really aware of the psychology with everything going on. So it's kind of fascinating it did get made because I feel like it's kind of tough to sell as a film.
Well, funny enough, I mean, this is one of those things, it's hard to predict the behavior of moviegoers, right?
Yeah.
Because if you put the budget, it's estimated somewhere between $1.5 to $2 million was the budget, and it made close to 10. So,
It was a modest success. Yeah, it was
they made their money back, right? And this established Kubrick as a director who could make money because, let's see, this was 1962. So by 1963, Spartacus had doubled its budget in terms of returns, and then would go on to make another 14 million later. So I think it totaled around like 42, 45 million or something like that on a 12 million budget. Not that they would have known that yet, but I'm just saying like over the years. And then this one was profitable. So this was establishing him as a director that could take this sort of what's it called when you make a book out of a novel, like he could do the
adaptation.
Thank you, adaptation of a novel well, right, and make it profitable, which is important for him later.
I'm really proud of us. I think we got through this whole thing with Lolita, and there can't be anything taken out of context to be used against us.
I don't think we're going to get cancelled.
Yeah. I think we did all right.
We survived. Right, we move on to a much more fun movie.
Yes, I believe so.
It's weird that I described a movie about impending atomic holocaust as the more fun one, but sure. 2 years later, after Lolita, Stanley Kubrick made in 1964 made a film to give it its full title because of course I have to. Doctor Strangelove or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. Which I'll read the description. From Letterboxd is after the insane General Jack D. Ripper, lol, initiates a nuclear strike on the Soviet Union, a war room full of politicians, generals, and a Russian diplomat all frantically try to stop the nuclear strike. Um, just before we talk about this movie again, I'm sorry to jump into with more contextual stuff. Have either of you guys seen Failsafe, which is the other
No,
movie?
I missed out on that one. I think it was on the club. I don't think I was in the club at the time when y'all did that.
Oh, did we watch that in the club? I just watched it on my own at home
I
now.
think it was an expiring pick.
Oh, I haven't seen it yet. If that's
Okay,
the
then
Okay.
case.
maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. I could
So
be wrong.
Failsafe is the other film based on Red Alert, the book that Doctor Strangelove is based on. I'm just trying to double check when Failsafe was made, just in terms of context. I'm pretty sure it was um, very similar. It was around the same time anyway. I have the Blu-ray somewhere. Essentially, Failsafe is like the most serious version. Nearly the exact same beat for beat as Doctor Strangelove, just with none of the jokes. But a
Oh,
really
okay.
good Henry Fonda performance as the president. Um, so I would recommend Failsafe if you do want a more serious take on this movie or on
Okay.
this subject matter. But in terms of Doctor Strangelove, this is one of my favorite Kubrick movies. I love this film so much. It
Yep.
is so funny. It's just there's so many jokes. There's so many jokes that you miss them, you don't catch them until like the third watch. It's just packed full of jokes and insane moments. And this might be like I think Peter Sellers in his multiple roles it has to go down as one of the best sort of acting performances in history. With all the different roles that Peter Sellers plays, but even like the rest of the cast is so good. Sterling Hayden is very very good as Jack D. Ripper. Um,
Yep.
who I used to find exceptionally hilarious, but in a post-COVID world, I find him less funny and more scary because there is actually deranged people like this walking around that we know. So I think in modern context, in a post-COVID world, he's less funny now. But also George C. Scott is also fantastic as the general character. So I think this is a tour de force in acting. But yeah, this film is just a 10 out of 10 for me. It's one of the best. It's probably the best comedy film ever made. As far as comedy films go, I think this is the cream of the crop.
Well, and you know, it's a big issue that you see with like a lot, especially older comedies, and this will happen to every comedy, even ones made today, is some of them just don't age well. Like because they're topical. A lot of them are trying to talk about things that are happening right now. And Strangelove does that, but almost everything it talks about is still pretty relevant. Like a lot of the jokes that, like the joke I say all the time, like to my girlfriend, if I just to be like, if I say something dumb, it'll be like, you'll have to answer to the Coca-Cola company. And that joke is hysterical. It's like one of my favorite jokes in like any
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
But you know, it's one of those things where it's like the only person who's going to be above consumerism is the president right now. So it's like there's some point there, like in American politics.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of
The
the jokes they tread that line between topical at the time, but also very timeless. Like if you compare this to say another great airplane or another great comedy movie, Airplane, um, which probably has the highest joke for scene count in cinema history. But a lot of the jokes they are actually very kind of the time. A lot of the jokes are very topical of the era it's made in. They're not as timeless. A lot of them are. I love Airplane. But I feel like Doctor Strangelove, despite obviously a lot of the stuff being era specific, a lot of the jokes are very timeless as well, which is why it kind of prevails.
and also in Airplane, we don't. Um, I get hate for this because people are like, leave my movie, leave my favorite movie alone. But there's a lot of like homophobia and like a lot of stuff that just doesn't age well. And like, we have no idea on Kubrick's opinion on that stuff because he just doesn't even go there, right? It's just a satire on war culture and fear culture and like all that stuff, and that's gonna be timeless. I would almost put this more as like a Mel Brooks movie than a Jerry Zucker one in my head. This would be closer to like Blazing Saddles or something, I think, for me, in terms of, or like Young Frankenstein or something where it's like so intelligent, not just strictly jokes, but also like, this incredible intelligence sort of under it. Um, I don't want to, I can't talk about comedies without saying Lubitsch makes the best comedies of all time. So let's make that like, we have to go on record as a podcast and say that. Ernst
Was he the one
Lubitsch,
that made that To Be or Not to Be?
yeah.
God, I hated that movie. But go
No,
on.
you didn't.
I don't even. You're.
The Lonely Island are better.
No, you didn't hate that movie, Zach. You just need to see it again. That is one of the best.
You just
Oh
didn't
my.
understand it. You just didn't get it.
Oh, that made me sad. We've talked about that before, though. That's bringing up a memory where we've talked about your hatred of that amazing movie
Well, no,
before.
we did.
watched
We
it.
did. Yeah,
We
we
did an
did it
episode
for
of it.
this. Yeah, and we because we were doing the thing where it was like, what was our least favorite movies we watched that year, and I put that in there. And the reason I said it was because like we watched it 3 weeks before that. I was like, I don't even remember it.
That's what it
Like,
was.
I
That's
was
what
like,
it
I
was.
can't even. I had to put it in my list. We just watched it. I don't even remember anything
I
about
blocked that out of my memory. That's right. Well, okay. So maybe it's not a universal opinion on the podcast.
it.
But Lubitsch to me makes the best comedies, like his Noel Coward comedies, like Designed for Living. Some of these are just, I think it's hard to beat. But this is, as a single film, it has to be top three if it's not number one. I just like it does that thing in comedies which I love so much, where the comedy kind of sneaks up on you because they play it so straight. It takes a little bit of time to realize how they're just going for the ludicrous at like every turn. And then once that switch hits, I mean, it's not like an hour into the movie. It's like 15, 20 minutes into the movie or something. But then once that switch hits, it's like, oh, okay, this is going to be fun. And then it just keeps getting more fun. um, I do want to quickly call out, this is the 69th best movie of all time on They Shoot Pictures.
Nice.
Good. Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it did drop 20 points. So last year it was 49. But I think that's,
I feel like a comedy movie getting that number just feels correct. So I'm fine
yeah,
with that.
exactly. Exactly. No, 69 is better than 49
Yeah.
from a comedy. But it's up there right by, I mean, all the films you would expect to be up there. Chinatown, Once Upon a Time in the West, The Strata, Metropolis, Pierre LeFou, Shoah, Goodfellas, Rio Bravo. Like it's up there in the canon, right in the top of the canon. So, and I think for my sake, like completely well deserved. And this is a movie that I hope every generation will continue to find funny and bizarre and amazing.
Well, there's kind of a double-edged sword to that, right? Like the longer people find it funny, it means the less that things have changed. So it's almost like maybe it'd be better for the world if this didn't age well.
Oh shit, that's a great point. That's a
Well, this is
great
the point
point.
I was saying, like with the scene where General Ripper is explaining, the whole thing about the commies trying to infiltrate the water to get their, I think, what is it, precious bodily fluids, something like that. When he's explaining that to not Muffley, whatever the captain's called, Mandrake, I think, something like that. When he's explaining that to him, like that must have been hysterical for a long time. And now, because you see so much of this shit with since COVID, it's just like it's kind of not that funny anymore because like there are
It's just sad.
this is kind of sad now because there are people who actually do legitimately believe this stuff. So it's like
That's true.
this is not as funny. But there's still so much stuff that's funny. That the whole Coca-Cola machine scene is obviously incredible. My favorite scene are the scenes where President Merkin Muffley, which is a great name, is on the phone to the
With the Russian, yeah,
premier.
yeah.
Oh, it's so funny. It's just a tour de force. It's just a tour de force in comedy from Peter
Yeah.
Sellers. It's
Mhm.
just so where he's like, yeah, I'm just as upset as you are, Dimitri. It's just so funny that
Yeah.
like they're talking about the end of the world as if like they're having a lovers tiff,
Yep.
and it's just genius. It
Yeah,
is
yeah.
just absolutely genius because it's not stupid at all. It's just so it's just incredibly well done. It's so well written. It's so
Hmm.
well delivered. It just everything about it works so well. It's amazing. That's probably my favorite scene where he's on. Can you tell them to turn the music down, Dimitri? It's just so funny. Oh my God. I could watch that scene all day.
Yeah.
It's like it's probably the most quoted part of the movie, I would say. But like the movie sums itself up well with that part where it's like, "Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. It's a war room."
Yeah, exactly. It's just brilliant, brilliant, and like a great example of just one of those subtle jokes, though, isn't it? Like,
Mhm.
if you weren't really paying half attention, you wouldn't even re understand that that was a joke, you know? I don't know if you
Mhm.
guys know much about the background in terms of the making of this movie. They actually had a planned different ending for this that they decided was too stupid and they cut it out. I don't know if you
So
guys
it
are,
was like more ridiculous than a dude riding an atomic bomb with a cowboy hat. I'd love to hear
yeah, it was literally going to end with them having a pie fight in the war
it.
room.
That sounds
And they filmed
awesome.
it. There's stills that still exist. They actually filmed it and then they
I
decided
mean,
to leave it off.
they probably made the right choice because like the end is like even if people haven't seen the movie, they've seen that reference, whether it's in The Simpsons or something else.
Yeah.
So they
Mhm.
made the right choice, but that would have been pretty funny.
Yeah. That's when it would verge into airplane
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
comedy
yeah, yeah,
with the
yeah.
pie fight. It would lean more into that. They did film it though. It was in the script that it was gonna end with a massive pie fight in the war room and it was filmed. But yeah, it didn't make the final cut.
Uh,
Uh,
yeah, go ahead. You first.
no,
I want
I
to talk
was
about.
just gonna say with the one about the war room joke. I wonder if that's what like Coppola pulled for that part where Kurtz is talking about. He's like, people that drive planes aren't even allowed to write "fuck" on their airplane because it's obscene. And he's talking about like fighter jets and stuff like that. I was like, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
interesting. That's funny. Like the irony of that, basically, right?
yeah, yeah. Like you have to be professional and you have to be gentlemanly when you're talking about war.
Yeah.
The writer for this movie, so one of them is a guy who is pretty interesting. He was a satirist and like an essayist that was all kind of like a Mark Twain style. Yeah, everything was comedy. His name was Terry Southern, and he was older, but he was one of the first writers in Saturday Night Live in the 80s.
Oh,
After it kind of got some steam, he was part of the wave where they brought in very accomplished writers to come in, and it really kind of took off in the 80s. He was a part of that. He also was a writer on Easy Rider, which is, I think, an interesting one. And he was a writer on Barbarella. Um, Interesting career, but most of his career was outside of Hollywood. But I think it definitely needed that kind of comedy voice because I don't think when people think of Kubrick, the first thing they think of is just this like hilarious satirist. Um, and then the other writer, I don't know too much about, but it's a British guy named Peter George, and he only has two screenplay credits. And he died in 1966 at like 40 years old. So his career was cut short. But yeah, we talked about this a little bit last week with when we were talking, or recently, excuse me, when we were talking about um, directors that I'm trying to remember who it was now, the context of it now. We were talking about directors who need like a good writer or writers who need a good director. Um, oh, you know what it was? I was listening to an old podcast on the plane. That's why it's on my brain. I'm sorry. But we got to talking about Michel Gondry, who's like this director that needs a good writer, or Charlie Kaufman, who's this amazing writer but needs a good director. And this to me is interesting because Kubrick, we saw his writing ability early on, right? With in the first four films we watched, doesn't seem like he's a naturally gifted writer. And when you look at like Killer's Kiss or Fear and Desire, right? Fine, low budget movie, student film, all that kind of stuff. But still, there's nothing in there that indicates he's like a good writer.
mhm.
But as he starts getting into novels, now we're getting into that phase where he's getting, first of all, studio backing. And second of all, he's writers helping him, and then also basing his work off of novels. It seems like he's able to adapt and carry like a vision in his head for what these stories need to be exceptionally well. And it's fun because this to me feels like his. Have you all both seen Eight and a Half from Fellini?
Yeah.
I've seen
Abs-
9.
Poor
So,
bastard.
so does that count?
Yeah,
No.
sure.
Okay. Okay.
But that was the movie that was the turning point in his career where he went from being an unbelievably talented studio director to being a surrealist. And he kind of like put his marker in the sand and was like, I'm gonna go make the movies I want to see, like Studio Be Damned. To me, Strangelove is that for Kubrick. Everything after this is like unequivocally a Kubrick film. And this kind of started that, which is fun. Everything after this is in color. Everything after this is like incredible visual styles or something that's like unique about it and memorable about it as far as putting it in the top 100 films ever made, right?
Hmm.
For a lot of them. Um, so I think
Yeah.
this movie, it's this movie's fun for me for a lot of reasons. I didn't realize until we were doing this run straight through that this was the marker, the demarker for that, demarcation for that. But just another layer there that I love about the movie.
Yeah, it does feel like a watershed moment for
Yeah,
his career. Like The Killing and Paths of Glory are both great, but I don't know if either of us or if any of us would call them quintessential Kubrick.
exactly.
Like I hadn't seen, like I didn't watch them up until a couple of years ago. With The Killing and Paths of Glory, despite the fact that they're two of my favorite Kubricks now. Just in terms of film perspective, they're not as iconic as the ones that would come from Doctor Strange onwards. This
Yeah,
next sort of seven movies, the three that we're going to talk about next week and the three after, and Doctor Strangelove, they are his sort of iconic films. Even if something like Full Metal Jacket, for example, maybe if it's not as good as The Killing or Paths of Glory, um, it's probably still more iconic and has a bigger cultural footprint than
exactly.
The Killing or Paths of Glory do.
Yeah, and I think more to the point of it, just to say it like, I mean, I'm just agreeing with you, but like, it's the movies that people think about when they think about Kubrick, right? Unless they've gone deep and seen The Paths of Glory and like it better. But like, when you first hear about Kubrick, these are the ones you think, it's like these seven, right? Are going to be one of the ones you see.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, you think of like Private Pile in the bathrooms of Full Metal Jacket. That's an iconic image that
Yeah,
just general film, just general cinema goers will associate with Kubrick, despite better films existing earlier in his career.
exactly.
But again, we're not going to talk too much about Full Metal Jacket. That's a couple of weeks away. Any more thoughts on Doctor Strangelove?
No, but I might go rewatch it soon.
Yeah, it's just so easy to watch. It's so digestible. It's only short as well. I think it was like 88 minutes or something. It's
Yeah, it's right at 90 minutes.
yeah.
I was panicked because there was a general feeling that I loved it, but I couldn't remember specifics. So yesterday I was flying home. I had a 4 hour layover in the Amsterdam airport. So I bought a coffee and a pastry and I just sat there in the airport watching it. It was either this or Lolita, and I figured of the two, this is a better one to watch in an airport because I
Less
wasn't
sus.
sure. Um, it's just, this is the thing I think about well-made satires make you
Mm,
laugh and also very sad at the same time. And I think this movie is just perfect for that because the
yeah.
stuff it's satiring is so close to reality. You're just like, damn, that
And
sucks.
I can't imagine what it was like when this came out, because obviously it came out when the Cold War was still like that was still a big deal. It's like 1964? Like
Yeah,
Yeah.
64. Yeah.
yeah, like Dear Kennedy got assassinated, wasn't it? Or was that 63? Um
It would have been 64. Yeah. Or
no, November 63, I'm pretty sure,
yeah.
right?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So we're talking about 1 year after Kennedy gets assassinated, the Cold War is still pretty much at its height. Imagine making imagine like somebody going out now and making a comedy movie about uh like the Ukrainian Russian conflict.
Yeah.
That's kind of what this is like.
Right. Yeah.
Cold War, it was so like interesting. Like I make fun of my mom because she was very much in that era of duck and cover. You know, that's the drills they did. And I was like, yeah, because that desk is going to save you from an atomic
Right.
bomb, I'm sure.
Right. Right.
But you
You
know,
need to get in the fridge, just Indiana Jones taught us. Get in the fridge and you're fine.
yeah, you
That's
can
right.
survive anything then. But it's you know, there were songs like there's a folk song I really like. It's more like a bluegrassy, like folksy hymnal type song, like Great Atomic Power. And that was just like such like even during the time, it feels like it was just such an obsession about like nuclear power and nuclear like weapons and stuff like that. It's kind of wild, like how much of you know, it's understandable that art is such a big part of it, but it's almost like they were desensitized to it very early on to a degree. Like it was almost like a weird acceptance thing.
I have to imagine that people growing up in the like children in the 60s would have just assumed that we were headed to some nuclear future.
Yeah,
Like,
it's gonna be fallout one way or the other.
yeah, like I have, I that like you said, that was just so deeply ingrained in the culture. I guess I give America a hard time, and I don't want to get into it too much on the podcast, but my 6-year-old had to go through active shooter training in his school, and I almost cried the first time he came home and told me that because I was just like so sad that that's the reality that they have to consider that. But I guess in a way, rethinking about history, like that's exactly what they were doing in the 60s, right? Like you taught kindergarteners if there's a nuclear bomb and all your family's dying, like duck under your desk and you'll be okay. So I guess that sort of culture of just like war and fighting and all that, I guess it's been here for a long time. I've never really thought about it that way before. The narrative has just changed slightly. But I can't imagine for parents that would be great to teach your kids about nuclear war and they're like 7, 6, 7. Like that sucks too, right? But it's just part of the culture here.
And in Ireland, we say, be grand, we'll just go to the pub. Um, cool. I think we'll wrap up on Doctor Strangelove. So in terms of what we're going to be discussing next time out, so we have 6 Kubrick films left in our run. We're over halfway there now, basically. Or just under halfway there. 1,
Yeah.
2, 3,
No,
4,
over.
5.
Over.
Yeah.
No, there's only 6 left.
Yeah.
Yes, we've done 7.
So next episode, we're going to be talking about 3 films, 3 widely different movies, sort of like today. So we're going to be talking about 2001: A Space Odyssey,
Okay.
Clockwork Orange, and Barry Lyndon.
Ended out on a good note again. That's the way it should be.
So yeah, that's what we're going to discuss next time out, and obviously we'll keep the final 2 till after that. I don't think I've watched Clockwork Orange in about 10 years, so that'll be interesting. I've seen it a couple of times, but I feel like I owe it to revisit it. Don't remember when the last time I saw 2001: A Space Odyssey, but it gives me an excuse to break out my nice 4K
Nice.
edition of 2001 that I
Thanks,
have sitting
Nolan.
on my shelf for a while. Yeah, so I need to crack that out and watch that. I saw Barry Lyndon semi recently in the theater.
So jealous of that.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I've actually seen it in the theater as well in the last
Yeah,
year.
that's right. I remember you talking about that. Yeah, so I'm the only one who has not got to see it on the big screen. So sad
Yeah.
for me.
And it's funny just because when Kubrick originally came, and we can get into this more detail next time out, but just a quick tidbit. When Kubrick originally started filming it, obviously it was filmed in Ireland until the IRA basically threatened him out of the country. But when it was being filmed in Ireland, it was filmed relatively close to where I live, about 45-minute drive. A lot of it was
Oh, cool.
filmed. So when we saw it in the theater, there was a Q&A afterwards with some people who had kind of worked as extras on the set and some people who had helped with the Irish side of the production with setting everything up with the accommodations and stuff like that. So that was very interesting.
Wow.
But yeah, we'll talk about that more next time out anyway. I'll get into a bit more detail with it. For now, I think we'll wrap up there, guys. Thank you as always.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, all. See you next time.